Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 9th of October 2024. I'm Councillor Ian Massey and I am the convener of this committee. I now introduce the top table to you today. From my far left is the Vice Convener, Councillor Grant Stewart, Miss Jessica Gill, Democratic Governance Officer, and Mr Jeff Fogg, Legal Manager. And on my right is Mr Christian Smith, Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, Mr Sean Panton, Team Leader Major Developments, and Mr Paul Williamson, Team Leader Local Developments. And as this is a hybrid meeting, members joining virtually are reminded that if you leave the meeting during consideration of any application, you are unable to participate or vote on that item when returning to the meeting. This also means that if a member loses their internet connection during consideration of an item, they should not vote on that item. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you are leaving the meeting or if you have lost your connection and therefore unable to vote on the item. And whilst we are operating as a hybrid meeting for proceedings today, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat box to attract my attention? Q for question, C for comment. I will now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and attendance of those in the chamber and online. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies today from Councillor Cuthbert, Councillor Waters with Councillor Drysdale substituting, Councillor Allen with Bailey Ahern substituting, and Bailey Williamson with Councillor McPherson substituting. We've got two members online. I'll ask to confirm they're present, please. Councillor Harvey?
I'm present, yes.
And Councillor James?
Morning, Jess. I'm here.
Thank you. All other members are in the chambers, Convener.
Thank you. Can I ask, does any of the panel, the committee have declarations of interest today? No declarations of interest. So item 3 is the minutes. The minutes of the meeting of the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 11th September 2024. Can we agree the minute? Thank you. We do have deputations today. Can I ask if the committee agree to hear the deputations on item 511 and item 512? Thank you. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the deputations and members of the public watching today. Your request to speak has been granted. You will be called to the lectern as we reach the relevant item on the agenda and be invited to make your deputation by the Vice Convener, followed by a period of time for questions from members. It's requested that the content of your deputation is kept relevant to the planning considerations in relation to the item of business being discussed. Please also ensure that when answering questions, your response remains relevant and direct to the questions asked. Moving on to item 5, which is application for determination. 5.1 is local application. And this local application is for the erection of 29 dwelling houses and associated works, phase 1, allocated site H53, land northwest of Hughes Bahawk, Pow Mill Dollar. And to introduce the report is Mr Paul Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, everyone. As stated, the first item on the agenda today is for the first phase of a residential development on an allocated site at the southwestern edge of Pow Mill. The site was once home to a hotel which was vacated around 2008 and burnt down in 2012. The car park associated with that use remains, while the western half of the site is a vacated farm hub. The wider site allocation is for between 46 and 73 units, with a restriction to 30 units during the life of the current LDP. In this instance, the proposal is for a total of 29 dwellings, of which 7 would be for affordable housing, delivered by the Kingdom Housing Association. This application has been referred to committee today in light of the receipt of 12 letters of representation. They object to the development on the basis that they consider the proposal as contrary to the development plan, noise, location of the substation, and on information on boundary treatments and biodiversity protection measures. Having sought changes through the application process, the planning service are content that the revised layout is supportable and meets the necessary requirements of the development plan and supplementary guidance, subject to securing the affordable housing and developer obligations, as well as the conditions as outlined in the report. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Here we see the location of the site alongside the A977, which is located to the southwest of Pow Mill between the former farmstead and the residential properties which form part of Mill Gardens. Agricultural fields are located to the north and south of the application site. Next slide, please. This zoomed-in aerial extract shows the site in greater detail. The previous hotel was located centrally, with its car park still evident to the east. The former farm to the west is not within the application site, but would form part of a second phase of development, as indicated through LDP2. The extract also shows the general pattern and density of development in this part of Pow Mill. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed site plan showing the overall development of 29 dwelling houses. 22 detached bungalows of either 2 or 3 beds form the majority of the site, while the 7 affordable units are located to the southwest of the development, ranging from semi-detached bungalows to a 2-storey terrace of 3 properties. Some open space is provided within the site, along with a wildlife pond. An additional contribution would also be required towards the ongoing maintenance of the nearby Pow Mill play area. Next slide, please. Next, we see the proposed drainage plan for the site. This shows the provision of surface water soakaways within the site, together with a wider SUDS plan to the south of the A977. Next slide, please. Here we see the intended landscaping for the site. While the majority of existing tree cover would be lost, it would be replaced with new landscaping and habitat corridors extending through and beyond the site. This would also align with the requirements to ensure biodiversity enhancement, as noted through conditions 13 to 16. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed site plan extract for plots 4 to 10, which are the affordable units for mid-market rent through the Kingdom Housing Association. On the right-hand side are the elevations of the terrace unit, together with a visualisation. As outlined in paragraph 40 of the report, the materials palette for the affordable units complements those of the mainstream dwellings. This includes rendered walls, concrete tiled roofs, and UPVC windows and doors. Next slide, please. We now have a proposed visual showing an axonometric view from the boundary with Mill Gardens, looking back across the site, southwestwards. To the top right are the typical elevations of the bungalows. Next slide, please. We now move on to a series of recent photographs. This first image shows the view from the site towards the rear of properties on Mill Gardens to the northeast. Next image, please. This next image is taken from the former car park of the hotel, looking towards where the buildings once stood. Next image, please. These next photographs show the view northwards from the A977 at the site entrance and the relationship with whose bay roof detached bungalow which is nearest the site. Next slide, please. And this final photograph shows the view southwards from the site towards the location of the proposed SUDS pond. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I will leave you with the site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We do have deputations on this, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can you call on Mr. Raj? Good morning, Mr. Raj. We spoke earlier, and you're aware that you've got 5 minutes for your deputation, and you're willing to take questions from members afterwards. So whenever you feel ready, I'll start the clock.
Hope I'm not going to take that long there, probably. Yeah, I'm Raghu Raj. I'm here representing our company, Keros Scotland Limited. In addition to what has been mentioned in the planning statement, I would like to add that we have worked together with the planning department over a period of more than 18 months, developing this scheme, what you have seen today. In the process, we have gone through all the comments from the neighbors, the broader local community, the consultees and everyone, and made amendments based on expert advice and guidance in there. We've also most of the things have been addressed as far as we are aware in there, based on the comments from the planner and everyone else. As a whole, we believe that this development will be a positive addition to Pow Mill and address the much needed valuable housing needs in the local area. We have kept the design very simple and focused on making the development eco-friendly, sustainable, and that's about it in there. So I'll be happy to answer any questions if possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raj. Would members like to populate the chat function if you've got any questions? It might take a moment or two, Mr. Raj. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. One of the concerns raised by the community is flooding. Can you just speak for a few seconds about whether the flooding risk will be increased or reduced by this development?
This extensive flood assessment has been done in there, and based on what we have seen in there, the development as such doesn't pose much risk to the flooding. I know the neighbors are a bit concerned about the local boundary, and based on what our soil surveys and everything, the corners, there is a bit of flooding there, but not all the time when it is excessive rain or something like that. And it is probably because of the clogging on the overall field in there. But this development coming over will sort that issue entirely, because again, we have spoken to the nearby, landowner Harry Black as well, and he's aware of that. And we are working along. We will be happy to work with everyone in there to elevate the issue if there is anything at all. We don't see it as a problem there as such.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Another point that's raised by residents is this question of the substation, where it's situated, and they have concerns about noise and the magnetic field that created it. Now, for my schoolboy physics, we're actually sitting in a magnetic field now from all the lights and the devices, so it's all around us. But so my question is did you consider a different position for it? And if not, or if you did, why pick this one? And what could you say about the noise and this magnetic field concern that people raise? I mean, is it possible it can be put somewhere else?
We looked at multiple alternate positions in there, and where it is positioned right now, it is the furthest away where we can position within the development in there to the existing dwellings. It's from the existing dwelling, it's about 35 meters away. From our boundary itself, it's about 18 meters away where the substation is going to be. And also what apparatus is going to go in is going to be decided with SSE in there at a later stage. So what we reckon is probably the transformer might not be even there. We're not sure. We need to have the external discussion with SSE on that part. And even if that's the case, as rightly noted in the planning report by the planner, because we are well within the guidelines on it as well, based on the feedback from SSE, we might explore alternative options if required in there. But as such, right now, it doesn't pose any greater threats in there as noted by the objections in there as such.
Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks for your deputation today, sir. Sorry for being online rather than face to face. My question is a little bit of a follow-up from Councillor Ellingsworth, where he was concerned about floodwater, and I noticed on your plans that your SUDS is on the opposite side of the road, the A91 from the development, therefore would need a pipe work to actually take it underneath the road. Are there concerns with regard to the blockage of that pipe to lead water away from the site, and what measures can be taken in the event that it is blocked, as has happened elsewhere within Perth and Kinross? Thank you.
Regarding the blockage of the pipes, we will be doing some periodic maintenance on it, and that's the only thing we can just look at it. And yes, it's going to be going across the road over to the further side. And our design right now is just showing just one outlet into the V burn, which is there. But probably we can have a couple of other outlets in there to to elevate a situation where there's a blockage in one or some places in there. That's what we can just look at as well.
Convener Massey.
Thank you, and thank you for your deputation. During your deputation, you mentioned eco-friendly. Could you maybe give me a little bit of insight on what you mean by eco-friendly?
Yeah, the design, as the design, what we are looking at is probably would have seen the solar panels. And to start with, the solar panels, you'll be utilizing the solar panels to the maximum possible. It's about 6 kilowatts is what we are designed for. And on top of it, we're going to be having air source heat pumps. And on top of it as well, to complement that, we're going to have underflow heating in these houses as well. So we are working towards zero bills. That's one of the things we are looking at. And from a sustainable point of view, you see the water which is going to be collected on the sites, the storm water. It's rather than using some other ways and letting it out in there, we're having a such pond where it guides a natural percolation from each and every houses nearby that as well. We have separate percolation areas in there which collects it, and only the overflow goes to the suds in there. So that's where we just look at the eco point as well.
So Raj, there's no further questions, so you're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations on this paper, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you for that. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And it's pretty much what I asked the deputy, which is to our officers. Was advice given on this suds pond and why on the other side of the road? It just seems that you could give up perhaps one plot to put a suds pond in. I can see all sorts of problems coming here, and I just don't know the thoughts behind it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. As is indicated in the report, the application was subject to a flood risk assessment and drainage impact assessment. Clearly, the tabled solution is one that's come forward by the applicant. We haven't directed them one way or the other as to including suds on the site, so we've just got to assess it on the basis of what comes before us. We have done that via our colleagues in structures and flooding, and they've been satisfied with the details that have been provided. So from that perspective, it meets with our policy requirements.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks.
Yeah. Maybe just to add to that, Councillor James, I think the piping of water to a suds pond is standard. It just so happens that this goes under the road, which again is not in itself unusual or unique. I think this committee's seen a number of proposals similar to that in recent months. So the same standard requirements would be in place, and I think the deputation indicated that maintenance would be undertaken. So we're not concerned in principle by the fact that the pipe work would go underneath the road.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. Will the road require to be dug up to install this?
I would imagine that there are a number of ways in which it could be done, and what they would be would have to be agreed with the Roads Authority through the relevant consenting process. The detail of how it would be done, whether that would be via digging beneath the surface or moving the pipework through beneath the surface or through excavation, would be dealt with through that consenting process via the Roads Authority.
Vice Convener.
Thank you, Convener. Have officers looked at the noise and electromagnetic risks from the substation?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Obviously, the case officer has provided a couple of paragraphs in respect of the substation within the committee report, paragraphs 47 and 48. And obviously, we have consulted with environmental health. There are no specific planning guidelines in respect of the positioning of the substations, but the planning officer has advised that it does meet wider guidance that the National Grid has prepared. So from that perspective, we're satisfied, and it has been cited in light of the positioning of overhead cables which are going to be diverted underground, which is an existing situation. I'm not sure whether Kirsty Stephen wishes to comment further in respect of the noise aspect.
In terms of the noise side of things, there is a condition applied for any plant noise, so that would actually cover noise from the substation potentially, and also the air source heat pumps.
And maybe just again, as a point of clarity, substations such as this in the proximity to residential dwellings and their incorporation within small developments of whatever tenure it might be, whether housing, commercial, etc., is very common. I'm sure many of the members will have seen these substations located in almost every development you would see, so we're not particularly concerned. And as you've indicated in the report at 47 and 48, it sets out that there shouldn't be any issue in principle.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? No further questions. Mr. Fogg wants to come in.
Yes, Convener, just before you proceed to determination or a vote on the application, there is a error in the report of handling, which has just noticed. Members be aware that there's to be on-site affordable housing provision, which will be required to be secured through a Section 75 agreement, which is consistent with the terms of paragraph 78 and also consistent with the procedure note on page 67. Therefore, the statement at paragraph 81 that no legal agreement is required is not correct and should be disregarded.
Thank you for that, Mr. Fogg. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Bailey McLaren.
Sorry, thank you, Convener. Yeah, I would happily propose the application to proceed as per the recommendations from the officers and the conditions attached. It's great to see a disused site coming into housing opportunities, so happy to see this proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Illingworth, if you want to second that.
I'm happy to second. It's a site I know well because I've spent many happy evenings in the Gartwin's Hotel in the past.
Thank you. Can I ask, is there an amendment? No amendment. Can I ask members if they have any comments on the report? Councillor James.
Yeah, sorry, Convener, I couldn't get me commenting quick enough. It's just worth going for. I mean, every time we get a planning application like this with a lot of houses, we'll get objections, and always will. I was particularly taken by the suds on the opposite side of a major road, but also, which has been highlighted, is the substation. And I just wondered, do we still consult with community safety teams? Because these are always an attraction for kids, especially on a small estate, if you like. So, whilst the EMC might be brought up. It's the actual security and the kids' ability to play in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. I see no further comments. Therefore, the planning permission is therefore granted. Thank you. So we now move on to 512, which is the erection of 7 dwelling houses, formation of vehicle access, landscaping and associated works, land east of Honeysuckle Cottage, Carnbo. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you again, Convener. The next item, as advised, relates to a smaller scale residential development of 7 dwellings within the settlement boundary of Carnbo. The land at present is undeveloped and comprises grass fields, while the entrance to the site was previously a petrol filling station. While the proposal deemed as white land within the settlement boundary, the appropriateness of the proposal is considered against the principle of the land use and wider pattern and density of development. While this proposal would create a secondary street, the opportunity to develop this site is constrained by its linear nature. Notwithstanding, it's considered that the tabled layout is satisfactory and does provide a layout and size of plots which would align with those more widely in Carnbo. This application has been referred to committee today in light of the receipt of 12 letters of representation, including one from the Fossaway and District Community Council. They object to the development for a number of reasons, as outlined in paragraph 28 of the report, but largely relating to conflicts with policy, privacy and amenity, density, design and road safety, among others. The Planning Service are content that the revised layout is supportable and meets the necessary requirements of the development plan and supplementary guidance, subject to securing commuted sums as a contribution towards affordable housing and the conditions as outlined in the report. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. Here we can see the location of the site to the south of the A91, which runs between Milnathort and Yetzer-Muckert. The land lies between the aforementioned road, with residential properties fronting it, with agricultural fields located to the south, with the South Creek watercourse beyond. Next slide, please. This zoomed-in aerial extract shows the site in greater detail, with the application site the elongated L shape in the centre. This also shows the wider variety in plot sizes and density within Carnbo. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed site plan showing the overall development of 7 dwelling houses. The first plot would front onto the A91, with the second plot facing the internal access road. The remaining 5 plots would face towards the extended road running parallel to the A91. The dwellings would all be 1.5 stories, with variations in design relating to integral garages. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed plans and elevations of one of the 1.5 story dwellings. External finishing materials include off-white K-Ren to the walls, vertical larch boarding to dormer soffits and porches, natural slate roofs and grey alu-clad windows and doors. Next slide, please. We now see 2 of the slight variations in dwelling design as previously alluded, with either single or double integral garages. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed drainage plan for the site and the provision of storm cells within each individual plot and the provision of a larger private treatment plant to the southwest of the site adjacent to the turning head. SEPA have confirmed that they are satisfied with the intended phosphorus mitigation measures as outlined in paragraphs 53 and 54 of the report. Next slide, please. We now move on to a series of recent photographs. The first image shows the view southwards to the site from the A91. This shows Burach Beg to the left-hand side, and on the right, a former garage converted to an accountant's office, which was once associated with Honeysuckle Cottage. Next image, please. This next image shows Honeysuckle Cottage, top left, and the rear of Burach Beg, bottom right, with existing mature landscaping to its boundary. Next image, please. These next photographs show the view westwards from within the site towards the converted office, and then the view northwards back towards the site entrance where the filling station once stood, and the rear garden ground of Burach Beg on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. This final photograph shows the view northeastward, showing the rear garden boundaries of properties along the A91, including Mackery Cottage, and then the view eastwards towards other extended garden ground. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I'll leave members with the site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. And we do have deputations on this, so I'll hand over to the vice convener for the deputations procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Can we call on Ms. Hutchison? Ms. Hutchison is an objector to the development. Good morning. Ms. Hutchison, you've got 5 minutes for your deputation. And whenever you're ready, we'll just start the clock.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak today. On behalf of the many households of Carnbo that stand in objection to this out-of-character development, I want to highlight some serious errors and omissions from the report of handling. The report describes the development as infill development on a brownfield site, but this is a gross mischaracterisation of this development. There is a small part of the land by the A91 that could be described in such a way, and this land has already been granted permission to erect a dwelling house and garage. The parts of this site proposed for development out with that area of that application is grassland that resides behind an existing line of houses. When deciding on this application here today, this proposal should not be considered a brownfield site, but rather backland development on a greenfield site. Secondly, we would like to raise concerns that this application violates the LDP2. The LDP2 describes Carnbo as a linear settlement, with the majority of dwellings accessed directly onto the A91. The report of handling makes no attempt to hold this application to this description, stating that, quote, "The proposal in essence will create a secondary street, but it would be difficult to develop the site in any other way." This bizarre phrase seems to presume an opinion that this land must be developed to the highest density, even though this directly violates the principle of a linear settlement. This principle has been upheld before in Carnbo, most notably in 2020, when the previous residents of Croit Aran proposed to build a single dwelling house in the adjacent plot of land to the one in question today. This was refused in a unanimous decision. Quoting from that decision notice, "The character on this side of the road of the settlement was of properties sited relatively close to the road. The siting of the proposed development could create a precedent for further such properties, which could be difficult to oppose and risked undermining the existing character of Carnbo." This new proposal appears to be precisely what the members of the Perth and Kinross local review body unanimously agreed to avoid setting a precedent for. Failure to uphold the LDP2 here sets a dangerous precedent for Carnbo and for all of our rural communities. A key question for us is why policy 1BA is hardly mentioned at all in the report of handling and not discussed, when it is the main reason that other applications in Carnbo have been rejected or modified. Thank you so much for hearing the community.
Thank you. Are you willing to take questions from members? If you give a moment for the chat to populate. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Morning to you. You mentioned density in your deputation. Would you then consider less houses there to be acceptable? You talked about obviously there's 7 at the moment, which you felt was pushing the density to the maximum. But would you consider less houses there as an acceptable option?
I think the fact that the previous planning application has already been approved, I think it's perfectly acceptable for there to be a house in that position where that is brownfield site. I think it'd be great to see that developed actually, because yeah, it is an eyesore driving through Carnbo, and I think that there would be a real asset to have a house there. I think the greenfield site, I don't see any reason for there to be development, certainly not to the density that is proposed in this application.
Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. You talk about secondary roads off the A91. Would Pitcairn Lane or just along the road from it count as a secondary road?
No, it doesn't, because that was an existing track road. There was a property down at the bottom of the lane, and that was already there as a road, similar to the one that heads slightly north. There's a couple of houses that go back, but again, that was a farm track road that was already an existing track. So no, I don't see that as a secondary road.
Can I ask a supplementary? So is it the case that Carnbo is not exclusively linear, because not all the houses are directly off the A91?
There's no other instances in Carnbo where we've had a road that comes behind an existing line of houses. They've moved down the track roads, as I said, but it's not, we've never had anything. It would be a whole new road, it'd be a whole new street put in behind the A91. So any road that's parallel to the A91, in my opinion, is just not a linear settlement.
There appears to be no further questions. You're free to go. We have Mr. Wright, an agent for the development, and he's on the telephone. Can you hear us, Mr. Wright? You might have to do *6 to unmute. Mr. Wright, we are waiting for your call. You might have to do *6 to unmute your phone.
Apologies, members, just unmuted myself. Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you. I hope you can hear me. I'm watching on the webcast.
Okay, we can hear you loud and clear, Mr. Wright. I'm sure you're aware you've got 5 minutes for your deputation.
I'll hopefully not take that long. No, it was really just to thank you for the opportunity to speak. We've been through the officer's report, and we do feel that it adequately considers the issues raised by objectors, arrives at a balanced decision to grant planning consent subject to conditions. There's a couple of comments we would make on the report just to clarify. In relation to the principle of development in Carnbo at paragraph 35 of the report, the settlement statement in LDP2 does accept that the settlement boundary has been drawn to accommodate some development. And looking at the settlement boundary, we would argue that that would be referring to, largely speaking, this site. There's also a minor error at para 71 and in the recommendation. As indicated in the summary, a section 75 will be required to secure the affordable housing commuted sum. We would also highlight that there is obviously a material consideration of significant weight in the shape of the nationally announced housing emergency, which isn't referenced in the report but is a consideration to bear in mind. We'd be happy to answer any questions that members may have. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. That was very succinct. Can you give us a moment while the chat?
Absolutely.
populate? Members, if you'd like to populate the chat. Convener Massey.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wright. My question is about affordable housing. I see that you've got no affordable housing on site. Is this something that you could maybe think about, or is this something you have thought about? Why haven't you put it in?
Well, developments of this scale are quite difficult to deliver on-site affordable housing on, given the operating procedures of the affordable housing providers. Small-scale affordable housing units in remote settlements are difficult for them to manage, maintain, and in this instance, we felt, given the scale of development, a commuted sum would be appropriate to provision elsewhere. There is also an element of viability, a point that we've not progressed in the application, but it's not a terribly given the drainage mitigation that we need to undertake and the costs associated with that, we felt that we needed to secure the market housing on the site to offset those costs. So we did consider it, but it's not deemed to be a suitable site to deliver two affordable houses on.
Thank you, Mr. Wright, for that. You say it's not a suitable site. I mean, any site surely is suitable for affordable housing. The first houses that going into the site, they could be both affordable housing. I can't understand why RSL wouldn't take them on. There's other affordable housing quite close by that Kingdom Housing looks after. And if you've watched the video, you'll have seen that the last application had 7 affordable housing on it. So I just really don't understand why you're turning around and saying that it's not viable on that site. Is it not viable monetary wise for yourself, or?
No, I mean, it's really just we've got an area of contamination that needs to be resolved. We've got drainage mitigation that we need to secure and deliver, which does impact the viability of the overall development.
Mr. Wright, there appears to be no further questions, so you're free to go. Convener,
Thank you very much.
Convener, there's no further deputations on this application, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. One of the deputations challenged the status of the site as being a brownfield site. I wonder if officers can clarify the position beyond any doubt, please.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Yes, as was acknowledged, part of the site has been previously developed. There was a former petrol filling station located at the entrance area to the site, around where plots 1 and 2 are located. Otherwise, the site is wholly contained within the settlement boundary for Carnbo, as outlined in the LDP2, and as has also been referred to within the settlement summary, it does acknowledge that the settlement boundary has been drawn to offer some potential to accommodate further development and reflect the existing planning permission on the site. So it is a partial brownfield site, but it is also white land within the existing settlement boundary.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Harvey's withdrawn. Bailey McLaren. Councillor Ahern, sorry, I just looked away from the screen and it's all went to pot.
Thank you very much, Convener. Yeah, it's just based on your previous comment. If we were to invoke the Council's affordable housing policy, is that 1 or 2, based on the fact that there's 7?
Thank you, Billy Ahern. Based on the developer obligations response and liaison with affordable housing, technically it's 1.75 units. What I would also flag that at the point at which this application came in, it was validated at the end of August of last year, and the updated supplementary guidance on developer obligations and affordable housing wasn't adopted until I think it was the 18th of December 2023. So obviously there has been a change in stance in respect of affordable housing and how we might otherwise want to see it delivered. Obviously now there is very much an emphasis on on-site delivery, whereas at the time there are other considerations that came into play, and certainly we have the Council's Affordable Housing Enabler, Campbell Hall, on the call, should you wish to have further input from him in respect of why it's not been possible or why we've accepted a commuted sum.
Yes, please. I'd like to have some more information on that.
Campbell?
Good morning, convener, and morning, members. Yeah, as Paul's alluded to there, we would apply the developer contributions and affordable housing supplementary guidance. So, as the report notes, the affordable housing obligation is 25%, which technically gives rise to 7 times 25%, which is 1.75 units. Now, if we round that up to 2 units, as the applicant agent has alluded to, and this is how I considered this, what I took account of, was the abnormal site conditions that I would have anticipated a viability, a challenge to the viability of being able to deliver 2 units on site. Now, that within the guidance, supplementary guidance, that is an option that is open to the applicant, and experience tells me that in this case it would almost certainly have been challenged successfully given the abnormal site conditions. That would leave us with the option of the applicant delivering 1 unit on site and making up the 0.75 by 3/4 of a commuted sum, which would have been £18,000. Off-site contribution is the next tier down, if you like. That, I think, applying the same principles, it's unlikely that the developer would have come forward with an off-site option. So that leaves us with commuted sums, which, in my view, on a development of this size, and given the timing again, as Paul referenced, of August of last year when the application was made, that a commuted sum was appropriate in this case.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, my question is around one of the points raised by the deputy, stated in paragraph 37, Cairnbo is a linear settlement, and then it recognises that this proposal would in effect create a secondary street. So could I get a better understanding from the officers as why they have found that to be acceptable, given again the case that was raised, the LRB case, where it was refused completely on settlement spatial? Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. These questions were all raised by the deputy and others last week by local members, and I personally responded to that at the time. But I'll maybe first cover the 2019 application decided in 2020, and that was refused, and that was refused initially by officers challenged to the local review body. So it wasn't just the local review body that took that position. In fact, the local review body took the position the same as officers had, but it was quite a different scenario. It might help if we get the picture of the site back up on the screen there. So in that case, it was a single dwelling proposed to be accessed by a narrow driveway in at the back of the property, Croyteran, I think the name of it is. So if you see that area to the east or right hand side of the last plot, it was that area that's a sort of square in there that it was proposed to put a house in isolation from any other development proposals, which is a clear backland situation. It's not creating a secondary street or anything like that. It's just having a driveway going between 2 existing properties to access an area to the rear. The proposals now being a much more comprehensive and well thought out development of 7 houses in a site where such development was always envisioned, the site in its entirety being identified within the settlement boundary and noted in the local development plan that the settlement boundaries had been adjusted to allow for future development. This site in itself, the most obvious version of that. So although it's not mentioned in the report, that's because there were significant differences in situation, but equally that area where the planning permission was refused does not form part of the application site, so it's not part of the site history, although it's adjacent, and referencing that history adjacent wouldn't have changed our position in relation to anything, so it's not going to adjust the viewpoint that we have if we had mentioned it, although it doesn't form part of the site. I think it's also worth mentioning that that application was assessed against the previous local development plan and TAPE plan. We've moved on quite considerably in that time, so there are different contexts in terms of the development plan policies. I don't see that there would be any particular precedent set or any weaknesses created. The proposals in our view are compliant with the development plan as we've set out in the report. However, I do appreciate that the objectors perhaps have a different viewpoint in terms of their interpretation and weighting of policies.
In regard to the linear settlement observations, could you maybe just give a little bit more background on that, expand on that as to, you know, this is creating a secondary street, so therefore there's possibly a loss of that linear settlement or not? I mean, maybe if you could give just a wee bit more on that. Thank you.
I think Councillor Longworth touched on that as well, that Carnbo, whilst some of it is linear or ribbon development along the road, that is not the only form of development. Equally, the scale of this site allows it to create its own environment, and we don't feel that the fact that there would be a secondary street or a street behind the A-class road is unacceptable. We don't feel that that's the case. Again, I think I did have some, I'm just looking at commentary here, and there was a lot of discussion about policy 1B and feeling that it wasn't compliant with that. We do. What my last comment on that was in the response was that I don't agree with that anything other than a rigid linear or ribbon form of development would be acceptable. Such linear arrangements are not the only way in which Carnbo is formed, and the context and scale of the site allows for a new street to be reasonably created in compliance with policy 1B.
I don't know why I put a question. I'm totally lost it today. Sorry. I'd like to ask a question. Campbell, I think the question is for you, and I don't need to tell you this, but for the benefit of the committee, National Planning Framework 4 2023 says what is affordable housing. It says good quality homes that are affordable to people on low incomes. This can include social rented, mid-market rented, shared ownership, shared equity, housing sold at discount, including plots for self-build plots, and low-cost housing without subsidy. Were all those options considered when you came to your decision?
Yes, I mean it's a standard process that when we apply the sequential approach as it's set out in the developer contributions and affordable housing supplementary guidance, that we would start with the preference being, the principle, if you like, being social rented housing that is delivered on site, and obviously in relation to this small development, that would very, very extremely challenging to deliver. So as I kind of mentioned previously, we kind of dropped down a tier to all of the other potential for on-site provisions, If I was looking at this now, I think, post December 2023, I think I would give, I know I would give greater weight to, if we're looking at a single plot, taking into account that it's still relevant, that delivering two plots or 2 units on this site would still pose a significant challenge given the abnormal site conditions, that it could be successfully challenged by the applicant as being not viable. Then the recommendation in the current day, might have been to ask the applicant to consider 1 unit of discounted housing for sale or 1 affordable self-built plot. I think it's still relevant that we would have been highly unlikely that we would have been able to attract the interest of PKC Housing Services or a housing association to deliver housing for social rent or mid-market rent on this site, and currently options like shared equity or shared ownership for reasons that are too lengthy to go into are not viable in the current market. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Campbell. I've got a follow-on question, which is in the same vein. I don't know if officers here that wrote the report, but at 65 it says, in terms of this proposal, most available affordable housing options would likely not be, and the 2 main words there are most and likely. Can I have some understanding of, if that says most available, which affordable housing options would be acceptable? It's been written as in most wouldn't, so some must.
Thank you very much, Councillor Massey. No, I think it's just ultimately, as Campbell has advised thus far, that yes, there are other opportunities that are vehicles to deliver affordable housing on sites. We've obviously ran through them today. Obviously, in this instance, the question has been over whether or not it would be fair to rigidly stick to the supplementary guidance, which came into effect and was adopted December 2023, which was a number of months after which this application was submitted. And as has already been alluded to by Campbell as well, given the abnormal site costs associated with drainage and decontamination measures, there is a question over the viability of the proposals as well. So, utilising experience, in this instance, we have chosen that a commuted sum would be appropriate in this instance.
Again, maybe just to clarify there, I think what that's doing, and it's maybe not the best wording, but what it's saying is that we have not gone through intricate detail of looking at this. We've looked at the detail that we do have. We've taken a proportionate approach and we've made a judgment. I think Campbell's clarified that as well, that we are 99.9% certain that we would get to the end of the process and we wouldn't be able to ask for any more than the contribution to be made. So rather than go through that complex process and not put an unnecessary burden either on ourselves or on the applicant to go through what seems to be unnecessary process, we've come to the conclusion that a contribution is the appropriate approach here.
Thank you. Bailey Ahern.
Thank you very much. My question is with regards to brownfield and greenfield development. And I think it was there's already planning application accepted for, was it the brownfield site, which I think is at the part of that development which is adjacent to the road, therefore leading to the rest to the greenfield, and why it's acceptable to extend that to the greenfield development?
The easiest way for me to answer that would be in respect of just reference back to the LDP settlement statement to outline the fact that yes, part of the site is brownfield, but the remainder of the application site to the south, yes, it is greenfield, but it's land within the settlement boundary, and for which it was always envisaged that some form of development would ultimately occur. By developing the front section only, you would likely lead to stymieing development opportunities at the rear as well, other than a layout of that's been tabled today.
Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. My question's for Mr. Fogg. In relation to this issue around affordable housing and the supplementary guidance that has come in since the application was made. My question's straightforward. Should the committee be taking into account the supplementary guidance in the scenario that we're in today or not?
Apologies, Community. I've got working through a cold. You'll have to bear with me. That's actually an interesting question that Councillor Drysdale answers there. In most cases, you look to the most recent iteration of the policy and expect that to prevail. However, in this instance, by adopting the supplementary guidance of December 2023, we were moving to a more onerous position. And the view that's been taken by officers, to some extent, it's supplemented by other considerations. But they're taking the view that, well, the applicant applied based on the former version that was in force as at the time of validation in August 2023, which was more accepting of committed sums as a way of addressing affordable housing, and will have made assessments on that. And the view is taken that it would be unfair to say, well, you've approached it on this basis, you've done your calculations, you've come forward with a proposal, but 5 months after you submitted your application, we've come up with a different policy that puts a greater emphasis on on-site delivery, and therefore applying that. In this instance, contrary to the normal situation where you go with the most recent iteration, the views taken is that we should continue to treat that in the way that we were treating all applications up until the adoption of the December 2023 policy. And that's been factored, that approach is compounded by the separate considerations that Campbell and Paul have both referred to, of there being land contamination costs to be absorbed here, drainage costs, and looking at in the round, they feel this is not the right site to be insisting on-site delivery, or you're tipping it forward from a viable project proposal to one that would not be. And in these wide considerations, they're taking the view that it would be wrong to put the weight that you might otherwise put on the most recent iteration of the supplementary guidance.
Thank you. If I can just come back, I'm a little surprised by that interpretation, I must say. Just so that I understand what you're saying here, you know, it's because the guidance is more onerous that you're taking that view. But if it had been, you know, if the guidance had been to relax the previous rules, then we would have been invited to take into account the supplementary guidance in that scenario. So, you know, I think it's a very key point here, if I may, that you know, the committee has approved or you know, guidance has been approved by council to change the policy, but the committee today has been asked not to take account of that.
Yeah, I mean, and if that was the only consideration, you might reach a different view, but it's got to be looked at in the full circumstances, and the full circumstances are, but there are land contamination remediation costs to be borne. There is abnormal drainage considerations to be borne. It's a small development only of 7 sites, not 29 or 56 or whatever. And because of those full circumstances, that's together led to the recommendation that you've got and the approach that's been taken by officers. Had it only been, you know, in isolation, the policies changed, it might have been a different outcome that the officers will be presenting this morning.
Again, but maybe just to provide some clarity, it's not that we haven't considered the guidance. We have, and I think through some of the discussion, particularly involving Campbell there as well, and my clarification earlier as well, the proportionate approach that we've taken is no matter which guidance, it's not policy, it's guidance we consider, that the likely outcome is that it would be a commuted sum. We've just not gone through and shown all the detailed working, because our experience, and Campbell's involved in that as well, is we're going to get to a situation with this scale and these contexts of development costs, sites, contamination, drainage requirements, etc., that the outcome of the guidance, whether it was the guidance pre-December 23 or the current guidance, that a commuted sum will be what the guidance gets us to. Okay, so it's not, we're not saying we're not complying with guidance, we're ignoring it or anything like that. We're just saying we're not going through a detailed process of looking at every nth degree associated to it, because all our instincts, experience, etc., is showing us that that's where we will get to. So taking a proportionate approach and saying that we're prepared to accept a contribution in this instance.
So I may should have added, Councillor Drysdale, that the answer you've been given this morning by Campbell Hall was that had he been applying it in terms of the December 2023 guidance, he would still nonetheless have been recommending the application of a commuted sum in this instance in any event.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Thank you for all these discussions around the affordable housing element. A wee bit of an apology. I probably should have asked this to the agent, but just for clarity, you're mentioning a contaminated site, and it was previously a petrol station, your filling station. So therefore, can we assume that those fuel tanks are possibly still even sitting in the ground, filled with sand and all of that goes on with evaluating, and therefore there is quite a high level of cost related to that too. Am I correct in making that assumption?
Thank you, Bailey McLaren. Yes, I think you are correct in making that assumption. We do obviously have a condition added at the request of Environmental Health, condition number 8, relating to the risk assessment and phase 1 death study. And I'm sure Kirsty Stephen would be happy to answer further if required.
Yes, that's correct. As you're aware, former petrol stations historically can contaminate land through leaks from fuel tanks, etc. So the tanks may be there, they may not be there, but that's part of the 4-part condition, that there would be a requirement for investigation of the site to establish what the risks might be, and then also potentially mitigation measures taken as well. And this is where there'd be these additional costs that's been referred to.
Thanks for all the clarity.
Thank you. And I see there's no further questions. No further questions. Okay. Can I ask for a motion? Motion from Councillor Braun.
Thanks, convener. I'm going to place a motion to refuse. I know there's been various comments put forward. I've driven through Carnbo, not recently, in the past. It is a village. I don't agree necessarily that it's a linear village, and the map certainly proves that. And that if you allow for that, then the argument for another street against it is not there, which then means there could be housing built. My concern here is purely the density of the site. This doesn't reflect the rest of the village in any way, in my view. Carnbo, as I say, is a traditional village in my view, when I drove through it and saw it. And I think the density of houses here is too high and doesn't reflect the character and amenity of what is Carnbo. I'm not necessarily against any building here. I just think this is the wrong design. And therefore I'm of a mind to refuse based on policy 1A. On the basis, I did write something down here, that it doesn't reflect the character and amenity of the village. and doesn't contribute to the quality of that surround. And I'm also thinking of policy 17C that does not improve the character and environment of the surrounding village. I know that Mr. Wright mentioned the housing emergency, which we all accept there is, but the existence of an emergency doesn't mean you can build carte blanche and not reflect the character of the build around you. So I'm looking at policy 1A and policy 17C. I'm not sure if anybody will second me. If they don't, then it's academic, but if they do, I'll hand it back to Mr. Fogg.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey Ahern, you want a second?
Yes, Convener, I'm happy to second based on the points that Councillor Braun has just said.
Do you want me to comment? Yeah. Convener, I think my advice to the committee is that Councillor Braun's motion is competent. However, insofar as he's attacking the density, I would caution the committee as a whole that I don't think objectively this can be classed as high density at all. And it's been assessed by officers as generally in keeping with the character of Carnbow. The land has been identified as a part of the settlement of Carnbow, where residential development was being essentially promoted by the planning authority. I think it will be quite difficult to defend on appeal the argument that this is undue of an excess level of density here, looking at it objectively. But I'm not going to say it's not competent as a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Fogg, as I said to you, I'm not necessarily against any development of the site, but I think the map clearly shows that it's not, in my opinion, not in character with the rest of the housing around it. It's not a question of density. I think it's just purely the character of it. The character of it, really.
You mean the style?
Well, the actual layout. I mean, if you look, all the houses around are separate in their own land. This seems to be squeezed in at the back. I mean, a less number of houses would reflect on this new site, would reflect the area around it. So it's I'm not particularly saying it's a massive density. I just think the character is not reflected in this layout.
Yeah. Part of the consideration that the committee would be expected to apply is that larger plots, larger sites will be inevitably of a higher price bracket and reducing the choice. So insofar as you're looking for a spectrum of house prices and sizes, if you were to have fewer houses with larger plots than these already, you're going to push it further up the house bracket, which doesn't assist with housing choice for purchasers. But it's a decision that the committee has to make. I just think it could be quite challenging to defend that argument.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth, you had a motion. Is that a motion or?
It would be an amendment now.
Amendment.
My amendment would be to accept the application and with all the conditions laid out in the papers. I'm content that the officers have done their job properly to evaluate all the options. I do know Carnbow. I'm going to sound like Councillor Wilson used to. I was brought up quite close to Carnbow, and I think this relatively small settlement of 7 houses will fit in well with that community. Yeah, I would like to amend that we accept the proposal.
Okay. Councillor James, your second amendment.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, I'm happy to second Councillor Illingsworth on this one. I mean, our officers go to great lengths to come and give us a report. We've also been advised by Mr. Fogg that it would be difficult to defend on an appeal, and we've lost several to Scottish Government of late, and at a great cost to the council. We have allowed similar developments to this one. If I recall rightly, one in my own ward out of Balathy, where there was houses on a similar sort of site. So while I agree, it's probably not good for the villagers, it's progress, and sadly, and we need the housing. So I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any comments on the report? Okay, thank you. No comments. Councillor Illingworth, do you wish to sum up?
No, I'm happy.
Councillor Braun, do you wish to sum up?
No, Convener, I'm happy with what I've said.
Thank you. So I'll hand over to Mr. Fogg to confirm the terms of the motion and amendment, and then on to the clerk for the roll call vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The motion is advanced by Councillor Braun, which is that the application should be refused on the basis it's contrary to the local development plan 2019 of the development plan, and specifically background policy 1A, placemaking, insofar as that it's not contributing positively to the quality of the surrounding built and natural environment, and secondly that it's contrary to residential policy 17C, insofar as it's also failing to improve the character and environment of the area or village. That motion is seconded by Councillor Ahern. The amendment is by Councillor Illingworth, which is to approve the application in accordance with the recommendation in the report of handling conditionally, and that amendment is seconded by Councillor James. I'll pass over to my colleague Jess Guild, who will take the roll call vote.
Thank you. Members, when I call your name, please let me know if you're voting for the motion to refuse or the amendment to grant. Baillie Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Baillie McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Amendment to grant.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Thank you, members. I have 4 votes for the motion and 6 for the amendment, and therefore the amendment will carry.
Thank you, committee. Therefore, permission is granted. Thank you. Yes, can take 5-10 minutes. Thank you. Those online, we're taking 10-minute comfort break.
Thanks, Convener.
Okay, welcome back. Everyone there on the line? Councillor Harvey, Councillor James?
Yeah, I'm here, convener.
Yeah, I'm here, Paul. Aye.
Thank you. Did I just get promoted? That's all. Thank you. So we move on to the next application, which is the change of use and alterations to a residential outdoor centre to form 8 service apartments, optional short-term let apartments, erection of a storage buildings, formation of vehicle access, parking areas, paths, steps and associated works at Donnelly, Taybridge Drive, Aberfeldy. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you again, convener. The next item, as advised, relates to a 2.5-storey former residential outdoor centre, which is also Category C listed, lying at the western edge of Aberfeldy at the corner of Kenmore Road and Taybridge Drive. As noted within the report, it is understood that the property has been unoccupied for a period of 7 years. The property has also been the subject of an application from 2021, which was for a conversion to 5 flats, and that was approved in February 2022 and therefore is a live permission until February 2025. In this instance, the proposal before us today is for the conversion and adaptation of the property in order to create 8 serviced apartments or short-term holiday lets, with 7 2-bed apartments and 1 1-bed property. This application has been referred to committee today in light of the receipt of an objection from the Aberfeldy Community Council and 1 other nearby property. They object to the development for a number of reasons, as outlined in paragraph 45 of the report, but largely relates to the conflicts with policy, the overdevelopment of the site with 8 short-term lets in comparison to the previous approval of 5 flats, potential noise and traffic issues, and design. The Planning Service are content that the table proposal is appropriate to be recommended for approval. While there is an accepted demand for mainstream housing in Highland Perthshire, the proposal in itself would not reduce the level of available housing and would see a vacant and deteriorating listed building brought back to beneficial use, and to add to the availability of holiday accommodation in an exceptionally popular area for tourism. The alterations to the building would also help restore this property and improve the visual appearance of the building and the wider grounds, which are somewhat uncared for at present at the entrance to Aberfeldy from the west. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Here we see the location of the site at the western edge of Aberfeldy, just to the north of the A827, with the River Tay running to the northwest and north of the site. Next slide, please. This zoomed-in aerial extract shows the site in greater detail, with the listed building positioned centrally in the site, with its car parking areas to the south and east of the existing building, and access taken from Taybridge Drive near its junction with Kenmore Road and Kenmore Street. The land to the west is located at a slightly lower level and is partially tree-lined to the road, and Donnelly Cottage is located to the north of the site. Next slide, please. Here we have the proposed site plan showing the overall development. The 8 serviced apartments would be located within the shell of the existing property, with staff and disabled parking at the existing top level. At the lower level, a new access would be taken from the A827 and a new road would lead to 13 car parking spaces. A new path connection comprising permeable resin brown gravel would lead to the back lead back to the building, with a meadow area maintained to the west. Next slide, please. This tree protection plan shows the extent of root protection area associated with the retained trees and also the extent of no-dig area beneath the proposed access road and parking areas. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed elevations of the building. This shows the replacement of the previously unauthorised UPVC windows with timber sash and case units and the remodelling and recladding of the existing extension with stained timber. While this would be a decidedly contemporary finish, it would read as a clear extension as opposed to the arguably pastiche material palette at present, and give a refresh and additional interest to the appearance of the property, whilst also recessive in colour. Next slide, please. Next, we see the ground floor plan showing 3 2-bed apartments. Next slide, please. Next, we see the 3 2-bed apartments on the first floor and also the parallel mezzanine accommodation of the extension. Next slide, please. Now, the top floor plan shows the remaining 2-bed apartment and the sole 1-bed apartment. Next slide, please. This last slide shows the existing, approved and proposed site sections. At the top, this illustrates the car parking area proposed would require some regrading to accommodate the parking area, yet reducing the need for provision of a retaining wall at the bottom of the existing embankment as had been proposed for the previous application. Next slide, please. We now run through a series of photographs taken last week. This first image shows the view to the site from the A827. This shows the 2.5-storey traditional property at its principal elevation to the street. Next image, please. These next images show the main elevation of the listed building with its particular features of interest in the top 2 photos and the more modern extensions to the rear at the bottom. Next image, please. These next images show the view eastwards to the bottom car park level on the top left and the view through to Denali Cottage on the bottom left. The photos on the right show the view down to the River Tay with the retained line of trees beside the Tay at the bottom. Next slide, please. These final photographs show the eastern elevation and the wraparound extension and the approximate position of the new vehicular access at the top and the respective visibility displays along Kenmore Road, the A827 at the bottom. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Just a very quick question. On paragraph 59, the applicant says that in the long term, they will be replacing the UVPC windows with backed wood, timber and sash casement again. And condition 10 simply says that the UVPC windows remain unauthorised. I'm just wondering, should condition 10 be a bit tighter to ensure that this work is done the way they say, or are you happy with condition 10 as it is?
Sorry, as it stands, yes, we're happy with condition 10 as it is.
Okay. Any further questions? No further questions? Then can I ask for a motion? Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I was waiting for somebody else. Yeah, and again, I know the community council have objected for the amount of property. Actually, it's no difference to the size of the outside. It's only internally that the changes happen and for good reason, I believe, to provide accommodation. So I'm quite happy to go with what our officers have recommended. Thank you.
Bailey McLaren, you want to second?
Thank you, convener. Yes, I'll second. As Paul Williamson said in his introduction, it's a disused building. It's listed. It's on the edge of the village of Aberfeldy, and as you enter it, it's very visible. So to see this back in use and tidied up would be a great asset, visual asset, and the creation of holiday accommodation is not wrong in an area where, yes, there is a great a high tourist activity. So I'm happy to support this application.
Thank you for that. Can I ask, is there an amendment? No amendment. Can I ask if members have any comments on the report? No comments on the report. Therefore, the permission is therefore granted. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to the final item, well, final permissions on the agenda today, and it's for alterations to a dwelling house in retrospect at 35 Simpson Wynd, Kinross. And to introduce the report is Mr. Panton. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, councillors. So, as stated, the next application before you today is for a garage conversion to a domestic dwelling house in Kinross. Now, this type of application would usually be permitted development. However, as the property is located within the Kinross Conservation Area, the permitted development rights to allow for this type of development are removed, hence the requirement for planning permission. So the application today is before you following the receipt of 20 letters of objection, including one from the local community council. Now, the majority of these letters of representations raise concern with the use of the proposed room, but please note that the application before you today is purely for the physical alterations to the building and do not concern the use of the room under question. The use of the building is being investigated separately by our planning enforcement team, as detailed within paragraph 4 of the reports before you. So I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. So here you can see the location of the property on Simpson Wynd in Kinross. The site forms part of the recently completed Persimmon Homes development on the former Kinross High School site. As previously mentioned, it's also located within the Kinross Conservation Area. Next slide, please. We now have a site plan showing the property under question. Here you can see the relationship to the neighbouring buildings. Next slide, please. This plan shows the dwelling house before the conversion. As can be seen, the garage was a small integral single garage. Next slide, please. Here we now have the proposed plans. It is proposed to change the garage to a bedroom, which is accessed from the lounge. Next slide, please. This first photograph shows the property before any renovations were carried out. Next image, please. This next image shows the garage conversion, which has now been completed. Please note that the application is in retrospect. Next photograph, please. This final image again shows the completed conversion. Here you can better see that the brickwork and new window match that of the existing dwelling house, thus having a minimal impact upon the Kinross Conservation Area. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed plan for reference. I would once again remind members that the application before you today is purely for the physical alterations and not the use of the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Can I ask members have they have any questions for officers? No questions, so we'll move quickly on to, can I ask for a motion? I'll put forward a motion for to grant the permission for the development. Can I have a seconder? Councillor James. Oh, no.
Thanks, Convener. You beat me to it. Yeah, quite happy to second. I mean, it's there anyway, and as we've been told, the use of the building is a separate matter. So more than happy. It looks quite nice, actually. But yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. And apologies again, Bailey McLaren. I missed you again. I know it's not deliberate, believe me. Well, can I ask if there's an amendment? No amendment. Therefore, permission is granted. Thank you. And we now move swiftly on again to the only plan for today, which is for the formation of a 22 megawatt solar farm comprising ground mounted solar arrays, inverters, 2 substations, compound vehicle access and access tracks, security fencing, CCTV cameras and associated works at land 320 metres northwest of Peaty Farm, Canoctree, Cooper Angus, Blair Gowrie. Do you have any comments? Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And again, Cooper seems to be coming under quite a lot of applications for solar or energy, whatever, please could ask our officers to take into consideration the local community and visual aspects and sight lines and disruption as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Well, with there been no further comments, can I thank the committee for being here today and everyone online and the deputations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.